How's it going, American History 2 students? This is Mr. Bell coming back at you with another video lesson. This is day 160 of 180 of the regular school year, and it's COVID-19 shutdown day number 32. This is your lesson for Monday, May 11th, 2020. Define the following. Bobby Kennedy, he was the Attorney General for JFK. He helped him through the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was about to be the Democratic nominee before he was assassinated in 1968 after winning the California Democratic primary, but he's most famously known for being JFK, his brother's Attorney General. Jupiter missiles, these are the missiles that America took out of Turkey in exchange for the Russians taking their missiles out of Cuba. This is the thing, along with the naval quarantine, that ended the Cuban Missile Crisis. Bay of Pigs was a failed assassination attempt by the American-led CIA to kill Fidel Castro and end communism in Cuba. Sputnik was the first satellite ever launched into space. It started the space race. It was launched by the Soviet Union. So to review these four, Bobby Kennedy was JFK's Attorney General. Jupiter missiles were taken out of Turkey to end the Cuban Missile Crisis. Bay of Pigs is a failed assassination attempt of Fidel Castro of Cuba, and Sputnik is the satellite the Russians, the Soviet Union, launched into space to start the space race. Today, we are going to finish Unit 5, Part 2. It is American History 2, Unit 5, Part 10. So 5.10, and this is the end of Unit 5 altogether. If you remember, Part 1 was World War II, and Part 2 has been the Cold War, and when we get to Unit 6, it will be kind of divided up like this as well. I look forward to getting into that stuff as civil rights, Vietnam, and counterculture, but for today, we're going to talk about McCarthyism and the second Red Scare. Now, McCarthyism we haven't talked about, but the first Red Scare we did talk about. It was the fear that communism was rising in the early 1900s, the same time it was with the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. That was going to happen in the United States. And Attorney General at that time, Palmer, put a young man named J. Edgar Hoover, who would later go on to create the FBI, in charge of rounding up suspected communists and getting them out of the United States. So that's the first Red Scare. Today we're focusing on the second. Joseph McCarthy, he is a extreme right-wing senator. He's a Republican senator in the 1950s. He had convinced many in America that communism has secretly infiltrated America and America's government. He created a lot of paranoia, a lot of fear. McCarthyism is the tactic of spreading fear using baseless charges, just saying stuff that simply isn't true, that some people will be not smart enough to believe, but many will see right through. But if enough people don't pay attention, he can use that as a powerful part of his political capital in the United States. The second Red Scare is brought on by McCarthyism. He says that Hollywood is infiltrated by communism, and that motion pictures, movies in the 50s are filled with subtle communist messages. He comes up with a list of 10 people in Hollywood who he believes are communist, and as part of this overall blacklist, which is a list of important people in the United States who are suspected communists. In many cases, them being blacklisted, as it became known, ended their career in entertainment and in politics. So he definitely had a negative impact on many people's lives. Part of the second Red Scare, you had HUAC, House Un-American Committee. They investigated and tried to search and hunt down suspected communists in the United States and get them out of the United States or put them in jail if they were U.S. citizens. Alger Hiss was a worker for the State Department that is convicted of spying for the Russians, and McCarthy uses this kind of as him as the poster boy for McCarthyism, because he's like, look, Alger Hiss, he works in the State Department, one of the highest levels of government. He's a Russian spy. He's a communist. It can be anywhere. It can be in your neighborhood. It can be at your work. And it spreads a lot of unneeded fear based on this one example. Now, an easy way to remember this is Hiss is a snake because he's a traitor, and the snake hisses. So that's an easy way to remember that one. Cold War effects at home, kind of switching gears here. Many people, instead of putting in pools or adding on to their house, would build nuclear fallout shelters. There was a big fear of MAD, as I mentioned earlier, mutual assured destruction, and that was the fear that we would nuke Russia or Russia would nuke us, and we'd nuke each other, and it would destroy life in Russia and America from that point forward. The Selective Service continues to be very active as we build up toward a potential war with Russia. Of course, thank God, that would have been World War III. That never came. Duck and cover drills were kind of very ineffective drills that students were asked, much like fire tornado drills that you guys have done growing up, to get under their desk to prevent them from experiencing a nuclear blast, which, of course, getting under your desk wouldn't do anything in that situation at all. Suburbia grows. You have William Levitt, who designs this concept known as the housing development. I know I skipped a slide. I'll go back to the interstate highway system. So in a housing development, which probably many of you guys live in, there's about 2 to 4 different models of house. The houses are usually close together. They're mass produced, meaning they can be made cheaper, meaning they can be sold cheaper. And it makes it a lot easier to live that part of the American dream of owning your own home. The GI Bill is introduced, and this is all when Eisenhower's president. It provides money in exchange for your service in World War II for the most part. Now, you could use this money to go to school, you could use it to buy a house or start a business. It was up to you how you used it. And William Levitt designs the housing development. I'm coming back to the baby boomers in a minute. Eisenhower, who we're not done talking about, but I'm kind of glossing over some stuff of his presidency. He's president from 52 to 60, creates the National Highway Act, which creates the interstate highway system. They're large highways where you can travel between states very quickly. He's a 5-star general, so you see the 5 stars on the Eisenhower interstate highway system. Every couple hundred miles, if you're on the interstate like I-85 north, south, 77, you will see these to honor the guy who came up with this. But the original intent wasn't interstate travel. It was to transport nuclear weapons in case there was a nuclear war here in the United States, or there was an invasion by the Russians. Now, to transport nuclear weapons, I misspoke, sorry, to make it easier to transport other types of weapons, because it doesn't matter where a nuke is launched from. So I apologize for that mistake. But for our military to be able to get around from point A to point B using these highways if we were invaded by the Russians or the Chinese. A big part of this, there you see the first big housing development, Levittown. A big part of this era was the baby boom. A lot of people had been away from their wives, soldiers, during World War II. They came home and they made up for lost time, and the average family went up from 2 to 4 kids. And what you saw is a spike in the population. This is becoming problematic now because as all these people retire, Social Security, which is to pay for their retirement, is not sustainable to pay for the retirement of this massive generation that's retiring now, the baby boomers. So that is it for 5.10. Hope I didn't go through that too quickly. If you have any questions, please email me at bsbell@clevelandcountyschools.org. Stay safe, wash your hands, and you guys have a great day.